In the pre-dawn hours of the morning on Friday the 27th of February 2026, bombs rained down across the Afghan city of Kabul once again. This time it wasn't American pilots behind the stick, or the Russians, or the Chinese. Instead, the warplanes thundering over Kabul had come from Pakistan, and they had arrived to send a message to the ruling Taliban government. If you ever attack us again, then there will be hell to pay. In the hours before the bombing, the Afghan Taliban had launched a major attack across the Pakistani border, fighting with equipment that the United States left behind just a few short years ago. Reports are still filtering in from the combat zone, but already it's clear that the death toll will be in the dozens or possibly even the hundreds. According to Pakistan, Afghanistan is no longer a state simply ruled by a hardline Islamist government. It's become a puppet of India, and Pakistan will deal with it in open war. Death on the Durand Line. As we begin today's very urgent episode, I'm recording this early in the morning on Friday, we got to include a disclaimer. Everything we discuss in this episode is accurate to the best of our knowledge and ability as of 9 o'clock in the morning local time in Kabul on February the 27th. While this episode will be coming out as quickly as possible, we're obviously going to have a bit of latency between the time it was recorded and the time that it's released. So, if anything major has happened in the intervening time, it won't be addressed in the intervening time. Now, the battle that broke out just hours ago, as the time of writing, took place at a time and location of Afghanistan's choosing. By all outward indicators, Afghanistan's attack was an ambush, or, as we'll discuss, Afghanistan at least believed that it was ambushing its neighbor. In a coordinated attack across several provinces at various points along the Durand Line that divides the two countries, Afghan fighters swarmed onto Pakistani soil, overran and bombarded military checkpoints, and raided Pakistani outposts in several locations. But in order to understand why Afghanistan attacked, we've got to turn back the clock to a series of airstrikes that Pakistan launched on Afghan soil earlier in the week. Pakistan is a nation defined by internal unrest in the 21st century, and despite its robust intelligence services, its nuclear arsenal, and a military that essentially controls the entire government, Pakistan has struggled mightily to deal with the insurgencies operating across its frontier. Those insurgencies and their recent history merit a lengthy discussion of their own, and if you're interested in that discussion, well, we published an episode on the topic a couple of weeks ago, so check that out if you'd like to learn more. But the insurgency we need to know about, for today's purposes, is the Pakistani Taliban. While the Pakistani Taliban claims to operate independently from the Afghan Taliban, it takes full advantage of the porous border between the two countries and relies on the support of the ethnic Pashtun population on both sides of the Durand Line. The Pakistani Taliban carry out frequent suicide bombings and other attacks against targets all across northwest Pakistan, especially targets that represent the Pakistani state, like soldiers and police officers. Pakistan has accused both Afghanistan and, more importantly, India of funding and supporting the Pakistani Taliban directly in an effort to undermine the Pakistani state and spread chaos across its communities. Pakistani Taliban attacks have increased dramatically over the last couple of years, and Pakistan has been on especially high alert recently after a string of bombings and ambushes by the Pakistani Taliban and multiple other separate insurgencies. Again, it's a longer story than we've got time to cover in today's episode, but as part of Pakistan's effort to counter the insurgent threat from the Pakistani Taliban specifically, Pakistan carried out a series of airstrikes on the morning of Sunday the 22nd of February. Those airstrikes didn't hit Pakistani territory, but Afghan territory, and according to Islamabad, they were a resounding success. Pakistani state media would ultimately report that around 80 militants were killed in the strikes, which it said targeted border hideouts that the Pakistani Taliban had been using. Afghanistan, however, shared a very different version of events. According to the Afghan Defense Ministry, Pakistan had hit multiple civilian areas, including homes and a religious school with no ties to the Pakistani Taliban. As Afghanistan describes the incident, Pakistan had killed, quote, dozens, including women and children. Afghanistan summoned the Pakistani ambassador to protest the strikes and vowed retaliation in alignment with the Afghan government's, quote, Sharia responsibility to defend Afghan soil. In retrospect, it appears that Pakistan took the threat of retaliation very seriously. Over the course of the following week, Pakistan came under attack from a wave of insurgent ambushes, primarily targeting police officers and emergency services, but Islamabad was clearly anticipating that there was worse on the way. Speaking to the press on Wednesday, a Pakistani minister explained that the nation was boosting its regional security and arresting dozens of alleged militants. Quote, our forces are on high alert to combat any attacks. On Tuesday, Pakistani and Afghan soldiers exchanged fire briefly across the border zone, while Pakistani intelligence issued internal alerts that a surge in terror attacks, particularly against civilian targets, was thought to be highly likely. Pakistan reiterated its belief in the deep connections between Pakistani Taliban operations, the Afghan Taliban government, and the intelligence services of Pakistan's arch-rival India, although, as is typically the case, those accusations were not backed up by any new conclusive evidence to demonstrate a direct link. It was against that backdrop of building tensions that the Afghan Taliban and its military launched their surprise series of cross-border attacks starting late at night on Thursday the 26th. According to video that made it out to global social media, Afghan forces deployed columns of armored vehicles, including what appeared to be US-made vehicles that would have been captured during America's withdrawal from the country in 2021. Other videos and photos showed Afghan troops deploying multiple rocket launchers at the front and launching barrages of heavy fire in high, parabolic arcs against some unknown target. The Afghan government publicly announced the start of its operation shortly after they began, framing them as a, quote, response to repeated provocations and violations by Pakistani military circles. But almost as soon as the offensive began, and long before the fog of war even started to dissipate, one thing became very clear. Afghanistan and its Taliban leaders had miscalculated. And now, before we get into all of the ways that the Taliban may have stepped in it this time, we've got to interrupt our important geopolitical coverage and sneak in a little bit of shameless self-promotion. That's because if you're learning something from this episode and you'd like to see more of what we do, then we know the place you should do it. Our premium subscription service, Fronts.co. Over at Fronts, our team goes even deeper into the global conflicts, the geopolitics, and the hidden influences that shape our world. Front subscribers get exclusive access to 2 premium episodes every single week, plus our entire catalogue of written articles featuring award-winning journalists and experts from across the globe. The subscription costs just $5 a month or $50 a year, and it helps us preserve our independence and expand our free offerings here on YouTube. While you're checking out Fronts, be sure to sign up to our twice-weekly email newsletter, WarFronts Weekly, which is totally free, and you'll get regular updates on all the evolving stories that we here are watching. Now back to the violence between Afghanistan and Pakistan and the Afghan government's regrettable miscalculation. March to the graveyard. As any student of world history already knows, there's a name for Afghanistan that's been earned in blood: the graveyard of empires. But even though great armies, ancient and modern, have failed again and again to conquer Afghanistan, that doesn't mean that Afghanistan gets the upper hand in every fight. In fact, the modern-day version would be hard-pressed to get the upper hand in any fight against any of its neighbors. Its fighting forces are passionate, but under-equipped, poorly resourced, and for those who've joined up after the Taliban captured the nation, they're often very poorly trained and inexperienced. While we can't fault landlocked Afghanistan for not having a navy, it's also got a very small, ineffective, and mostly grounded air force, and most of its heavy armor on the ground is either American kit that wasn't valuable enough for Washington to destroy on its way out, or the kind of thing you'd expect to find in a military museum. Really, the whole graveyard of empires thing is rooted in the sheer impossibility of dealing with an enemy fighting an asymmetric guerrilla-style war in the Afghan countryside. But that wasn't the sort of attack that Afghanistan attempted in this most recent assault on Pakistan. Instead, Afghanistan massed its forces and tried to overwhelm as much as it could in a broadly conventional attack. That, however, is what we could charitably describe as a strategic miscalculation, because although Pakistan's military isn't quite on the level of, say, the United States, or China, or even a warring nation like Ukraine, it is leagues above the Taliban in a conventional war. That's a reality that Pakistan demonstrated really rather clearly in the last round of major border clashes with its neighbor just a few months ago, and it didn't take much time after the start of Afghanistan's assault for Pakistan to begin to demonstrate its superiority again. As we've already mentioned, reports coming out of the area are still quite hazy, but it does appear that Afghan forces, or possibly units from the Pakistani Taliban, were able to overrun multiple Pakistani outposts and checkpoints. Retaliation, however, didn't take long. As the fighting continued, Pakistani soldiers began to mount local counteroffensives on the ground in some combat zones while unleashing their own artillery and rocket launchers in others. Pakistani air power showed up quickly along the front, dropping heavy munitions on the advancing Afghan forces. While both Afghan and Pakistani military spokespeople are known to inflate estimates of enemy dead, Pakistan's information minister claimed within just hours of the start of the Afghan assault that 9 Afghan positions had been taken, 27 were destroyed, and at least 133 fighters of the Afghan Taliban had already been killed. Afghanistan, by the way, claimed during the overnight hours that it already killed up to 55 Pakistani soldiers and taken 23 of their corpses back to Afghanistan, while other Pakistani troops had been captured. Each side has rejected the other's casualty counts as a falsehood. In retrospect, it appears that the Afghan Taliban had more working against them than a simple lack of understanding of the military disparity between themselves and Pakistan. With Pakistan already on high alert through the prior several days, anticipating that a major terror attack or other forms of retaliation might be coming, it appears that Pakistani forces were ready to respond quickly to the attack and begin a counteroffensive within just hours. Pakistan's cyber warfare response came even quicker, bringing down the Taliban's military communications infrastructure with what appeared to be an overwhelming distributed denial of service attack, basically drowning out the normal functions of Afghanistan's digital military infrastructure. Worst of all, however, were the air raids, launched with such speed and efficiency that it would seem as if Pakistan had already planned its strikes in detail. Pakistan launched 2 air raids back-to-back against the Afghan capital city of Kabul. There, Islamabad seems to have focused on the city's largest military base and targeted large structures that were believed to store munitions or fighting vehicles. The Pakistani Air Force indicated that it destroyed 2 brigade headquarters in the city during the strikes, although it's a bit early yet for external verification on the ground. Pakistan also targeted a military base in Kandahar, where the country's Air Force stated that it destroyed a corps headquarters, a brigade headquarters, a logistics base, and an ammunition depot. A final military installation was hit in the province of Paktia. While some highly dubious AI images circulated after the strikes purporting to show a downed Pakistani F-16, our team could state quite conclusively that whoever created those images needs to do a bit more study on what both F-16s and plane crashes actually looked like. As of now, Pakistan does not appear to have lost any aerial assets. As of the time of writing, it seems that Pakistan's strikes across Afghanistan were the end of the violence for the time being. Islamabad, however, doesn't seem to be finished. According to the nation's military leaders, its actions on the night of the 26th and 27th were just the start of a newly launched military operation. As Pakistan's Minister of Defense put it online, addressing Afghanistan directly, quote, "Now it is open war between us and you. Pakistan's army did not come from across the seas. We are your neighbors. We know your ins and outs." Pakistan's precise objectives in its new military operation are unclear, but the broad goal is obvious: to diminish or eliminate the threat posed to Pakistan from across the Afghan border. By Pakistan's own stated interpretation of the threats coming from that direction, there's not much use in distinguishing between the Pakistani Taliban, the Afghan Taliban, or even the alleged hidden hand of India. And in whatever hostilities come next, Pakistan is unlikely to hesitate when targeting the Afghan Taliban directly. The force of Pakistan's response and the obvious disparity in military capabilities between Islamabad and Kabul begs a larger question. What on earth was the Afghan Taliban thinking in launching an attack like this? Now, granted, here at WarFronts, our team does have a hard time really putting ourselves in the shoes of literal Taliban leaders, but we're far from the only ones left asking that question. As many international experts have already pointed out, this was not a particularly winnable fight for the Taliban unless their intent is to start a fight, claim victory no matter what happens, and just hope that their citizens don't catch on. While Pakistani analysts and media have claimed that India is to blame for the Afghan attack, that explanation leaves quite a bit to be desired. After all, if India were trying to use the Afghan Taliban against Pakistan, then it would be a rather odd choice to use the Afghan Taliban in this particular way, dispatching them for a full frontal assault when Pakistan was clearly prepared for a fight. And although there's a potential opposite explanation, that Pakistan somehow baited the Afghan Taliban into attacking in a way that was favorable to Pakistan, we've got no information on how Pakistan would have gone about doing that. As for what comes next, early reports suggest that both Pakistan and Afghanistan believe the worst is yet to come. In rural Afghanistan, refugee camps and broader communities are already being evacuated, while the Pakistani government is relying on local police to organize mass movement of civilians towards safer areas. Afghan leaders, or at least some of them, appear to have already realized that they've gotten more than they bargained for, with one Afghan official calling upon the UN Security Council to intervene and get Pakistan to de-escalate. Taliban fighters have reportedly started to pull back from vulnerable areas where they know they're at risk of being quickly overwhelmed. At this moment, the battlefield momentum clearly lies with Pakistan, where now Islamabad will have to make a difficult decision. Back down once it's committed to a new military operation in a state of open war, and it risks major loss of face in front of its supporters at a moment when the nation has just come under attack. But continue on its current course, escalate hostilities against Afghanistan, and Pakistan risks falling into the same trap that so many foreign militaries already have. Afghanistan isn't the graveyard of empires because of any modern or historical ability to wage war on someone else's soil. It becomes the graveyard of empires when foreign adversaries pour their troops and war machines into Afghanistan, thinking they can secure an easy victory. For the sake of all of those who'd be caught in the middle of a war like that, we can only hope that Islamabad and Kabul find a way to de-escalate before the situation can devolve any further. Thank you for watching.